Well, thanks all for having us here. Eric and I have known one another for several years. Since he had his shop up in Moxville, he had me look at, really based on my work at Moore Springs, the development of the trails at Moore Springs, asked me to come down and look at some property there, and then we talked about Community Park here in Salisbury several times. I just got down this week to ride it for the first time. I was really impressed. A little bit of background about us. We are a general contractor. We're a trail building company working in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. My background is in landscape architecture. I have a master's degree from state, and most of my work has been in planning, design, civil engineering, and I've also worked with several nonprofits, in particular focused on rural economic development. So I've worked with a lot of small towns and counties that are trying to attract people to the community and create a better, higher quality of life. And trails have really emerged as something that's very popular and a very successful way to attract people to communities that have land that's municipal land that's maybe not being highly utilized. Trails are a great way to come in and put a long-term improvement in the community that lots of people can enjoy, both inside the community and folks will travel to. And there are plenty of examples around the state of trails like this becoming real tourist destinations, particularly when the quality and the quantity of trail is high. So with that, Eric invited us to look down. We met with Stephen maybe a month or so ago, and with Leonard, excuse me, and talked a little bit about the trail and about the process that brought it about. How you guys have been working on it for a number of years. That you've got other land you want to expand onto, and we were asked to come down and give some opinions about the trail while we saw directions of going. Maybe some opportunities to raise funds to build more trail. We've had a good experience working with the nonprofits and governmental funders to support projects. So I guess the first impressions on the trail is that it's obviously had lots of work put into it, really committed. It's obvious as a committed group has been driving things there. Really well maintained. There's no, there's no trees down. It looks like the tread has been cleaned off well. Gets a lot of traffic. It appears that it's a well-used trail. You can tell it's a volunteer-built trail, all by hand. The site is, although it's, I can see why somebody would want to build a trail there. I mean, it's a beautiful patch of woods. The park in general's got good facilities. It's plenty of parking, and you can tell that it's something that's utilized. The site is fairly flat from what we've seen of some of the ideally the trails are best built on hillsides so that the water can run off of them. And when you have when you have a ridge top that doesn't slope a lot, and you've got floodplains that don't slope a lot, your trail gets squeezed into those moderately sloping slopes. With the heavy wood, you've got a lot of trees in there, so that means a lot of roots. There's steep slopes in there. When you're hooking together the flatter sections, the flatter sections are the easiest stuff to build on if you don't have machinery. So you see a lot of trail on the flatter stuff connected with steeper fall line trails that are going to tend to erode over time. The combination is there's some really good trail out there. It's really fun to ride. That the canopy, that the understory is so open it increases visibility a lot from one segment to the other. So I saw a few places where it looked like people were shortcutting. You know, they'd see another segment of trail, maybe not be sure where to go, and so there was some shortcutting. That leads to problems over time. You know, from our point of view, we build both with volunteers and as a turnkey project. So we can do you know, the hand finish work. We can do all the design work, the rough construction, and the finish. Or we can work in partnership with volunteers like yourself. One thing that we bring to it is experience and machinery. And the machinery allows you to overcome some of the limitations of the site and some of the limitations of just the amount of horsepower that volunteers have. Because there's only so much you can do by hand in a real sustainable way without just burning folks out. At Moore Springs, we built both with machines and with volunteers, and you know, sometimes it was nice, even if it was a really rocky situation where you couldn't really use the machine a lot, you'd kind of go out and crank it up and drive it around to sort of rally the troops, you know, because when, you know, as you guys know, if you've been building the trail by hand, it's hard work. It takes a lot of energy. So I guess my overall impressions are is you've got a fantastic resource there. You've obviously put a lot of time into it, and you've got a group of people that really care about it. And you know, and in order for it to be, you know, the things that I would recommend is just more diversity, looking at how your newer segments could be designed differently from what's out there to give you more variety and more variation in the trail. If you worked with us and brought machinery in, it would open up some of the territory that's difficult to build on now, and it'd give you a little more variety in terms of how you utilize the space. That would that create more variability and kind of sort of work to spread some of the trail segments out so that they weren't so close together. I think I recorded about 5.5 miles of trail in there. I think I rode most of it.
6.5.
Yeah, so I rode a good bit of it. You know, there's you know, it's obviously a great site and obviously worthy of more attention and more work, and we'd be glad to help any way we can to help raise funds for it, to help work on new segments, or to help you work on existing stuff that may have you know, sustainability issues. You know, I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Scott's ridden the site numerous times, and you probably have more to add than what I've said.
Well, yeah, I live in Statesville, so it's a semi-local trail for me. I've ridden it several times over the last 4 years, probably, and you know, it's a beautiful patch of woods, beautiful park. It's a great thing to have around, and you know, I think how I got into the business is not too different than Tony in the sense of I was the volunteer coordinator for Signal Hill Trail in Statesville for about 5 years, and I've put the hours in, all that stuff as a volunteer basis, trying to get people in there to help you, dealing with them coming and going for all their normal reasons that happen, you know. And I've been a business owner for a number of years. Blue Ridge Trail Works, we also do waterproofing. That's what I've done for the past 10 years as a business, and started the new venture up with Tony and a couple of other partners, and we do trail building and waterproofing now. And you know, so I knew how to use machinery from that, and we've sort of applied it to trail building. And so we have a couple of machines. We're getting ready to buy a few more, and you know, it can just make a world of difference in the sustainability aspects of the trail, as opposed to hand building. It's just the technical side of building a trail the way it should be built around here is really rough by hand. It's just a lot of work to get down to the organic mineral soil. You're dealing with, you know, some rocks here and there, and roots are a big issue. And, you know, those trees do nothing over time but get bigger, and the roots do the same thing. And so, you know, with machinery, we can handle those things in a way that, you know, we can take some of those roots out of the tread to where it's going to be a more sustainable tread and trail over the long term. We can add dirt where we want it because we're not doing it with a shovel. We've got a machine, and we can move, you know, a couple 100 pounds of dirt at a time if we need to, and put it where we want it and place it where we want it. And you know, we've both dealt with dealing with what's there, what trail is already there, and trying to figure out ways to deal with the issues that were inherited, you know, over the time. And there's also, you know, we've done a lot of brand new things where we're going in and we're putting new trail down that there was nothing there before. And so, you know, one of the things we talked about a little bit, I think when we met with Stephen and Eric and Leonard that one day, you guys had mentioned a little section of land that's across the creek, I think, that hadn't been built on because there wasn't really a good way to get to it. And one of the things Tony and I had been talking about was we felt like it might be a good idea that instead of trying to, you know, if everything can be better. I mean, you know, my dad designed and built 3 houses over his lifetime, and he told me every time he got done with one, he wished he would have done something different. And, you know, anything that's got any complexity at all, you do it and you're like, man, I wish I'd have done it that way. And that's part of the process. But so there's, you know, going in and trying to figure out, you know, how would I put it? Everything that's there is working. It's functional. There may be things that could be tweaked to make it more sustainable or more fun, and we're happy to help with that. If you know, my thought on that, if you want to go that direction, would be, you know, the people that are doing the most work out there probably know where the problems are, and we can go in and talk about that and figure out what to do and what could be done. You know, but another option would be simply maybe going in and doing a new section of trail. Maybe we can build a bridge across that. You know, we do that too. Put a bridge over that creek, put a new section in, and then we can evaluate from there. And, you know, the input you guys, we're more than happy to listen to input about what you guys want, what sorts of trail you want there, if you want something, you know, fast or more technical, or you want berms, or you want, you know, options. There's all sorts of things that can be done. And, you know, you guys hire us, you're the client, we're going to do the best we can to give you what you're wanting. But that's the key, is to figure out what you want, which can also be, that's a process in and of itself, because you guys are going to have to decide that. Typically, you know, the city is the land manager, the landowner, but you guys, the local population, you know, you're part of the city. You got the city government, but you guys have your input too, so you guys have to cooperate and work together to figure out what kind of trail you want. And you know, that's kind of it in a nutshell. I don't know if you guys have any questions for us, but sure.
Not just our trail, but all the other mountain bike trails that are on, they always blow the leaves off, rake them, they're immaculate. All I can think of is erosion. As much as we ride through there, it's just bare soil. What's keeping that from the road as far as leaving the undergrowth? Because what's there, we mash it down, you can see anyway.
Well,
when you sweep it away, there's nothing to stop the water from eroding.
Well, the idea of trails, as it's evolved in the design process, the construction process over the years, you know, you can look up National Forest Service guidelines and state guidelines, and IMBA is probably the best source. If you go to Trail Solutions, the book they wrote a number of years ago, you get basic design principles and construction principles. And so, in a nutshell, what you're trying to do is you are trying to you're essentially trying to get rid of the organic material that falls. So the organics are dead leaves is a big one around here when you got trees, grass, all the small roots from different small undergrowth stuff. You're trying to get rid of that and get rid of all that little soft organic stuff that's on top, because if you leave that stuff there and you start riding, what happens is if you get rid of some of it and you have a trail that's like this, roughly flat, what happens is it compresses and it becomes like this, right? It's cupped. And then what happens is if you have any downhill on that, what happens? Water comes in there, hits the cup, and starts running downhill. And so volume and velocity of water is what causes erosion. Water starts running down something, and we see this all the time. But an extreme example, you call it a fall line trail. So this is what you see all the time, pretty common on farms, and they're cutting logging roads in. You see this. There's a hill, and you go whoop right up it. Well, you get rid of, right now it doesn't erode because you got grass growing on it, or you've got leaves that are falling, and there's trees and all this other stuff. But you run a road up of it, and they get rid of all that, and it's just dirt. Then the water pools on it, and it starts running down, and it starts eroding, right? And trails can do that too, absolutely. Technically, when you build it and design it, you need to design it so you don't run straight up the hill. That's why you're seeing switchbacks. So you want to meander up the hill to keep the grade lower. That being said, the other thing you're trying to do when you're building a trail is the trail should never be cut like that. Actually, what you want is a slight slope on the trail. So typically, if you're building up the side of a hill, you want a 3 to 5% slope on the trail. If you're in flat ground, ideally, you want a crown trail that is built up a little bit above, and instead of being flat, it's sloped a little bit down on each side. Now, that's the ideal, and that's what you want, because what will happen is water will shed over that instead of pooling in it, and that's how you keep the erosion down. Now, doing that by hand is really hard. It's really hard to get rid of. It's easy to rake off the top loose organics, but you still you may have an inch or two, you may have 6 or 8 inches more of duff that is rotted leaves over the years that's still not to mineral soil, hard dirt. And, removing all that by hand is just a bear. It's really hard. And machinery, we can do it. It's just much easier and faster to do it that way with machinery. And then if you get it down there to the mineral soil and you get it sloped and shaped properly, so you're not going up and downhill too quick, we do a lot of what now, in the old days they called them water bars, and that's because the way they designed it, you would stick something across the trail. If you guys have gone hiking out in the mountains, you see them all the time. It'll be like a railroad tied across the trail. And the idea is to catch water and knock it off the trail so it doesn't run down the trail too long. And so you can design what is now called a grade reversal, where you're going downhill and you go uphill just a little bit. And you go down and up. And you can climb a hill like that, right? Down and up. So every time you go down, it sheds water off the trail quick at the bottom of that little dip. So all those things are how you're trying to control erosion. And so that's, it's a combination of the design of where you're putting the trail and the construction process of building it right and keeping the proper tread slope and runoff on the tread.
When y'all say machinery, what type of machinery? You got a small bobcat? Or?
Yeah, we have what's called a skid steer, which is basically like a small bobcat. It's a walk-behind unit.
Oh, yeah.
So it's small, and then we use excavators. So we have small excavators also. Yeah. So. And we still use all the, all the regular hand tools that are trail building tools now that really were forest firefighting tools originally. McLeod, Pulaski, loppers, chainsaw. We try to avoid cutting trees. Generally, we're going to design around trees. Usually, if we're cutting anything, it's dead. Sometimes you get in a situation where you got to decide, and something may have to go. But we try to avoid that as much as possible. But in those machines, the other thing they help us do is get rid of roots. Even a small tree, a couple inches around or something, you got that root wad, and any of that stuff that's left, it'll rot out over the years. And if you flush cut it, that's better than nothing. But a lot of times those stubs get left up, and somebody gets a little off the trail and the tire hits it and it blows or knocks them over, or if people fall, you can get impaled. And so we try to basically, you want to flush cut everything within the area, within the corridor, and then if it's within the tread or close to the tread, you want to remove it, because if you just cut it off or you only remove part of it, it'll rot out over the years, and then you're going to have a hole. And once you have a hole in the tread, a little depression in the tread, it holds water. You get some runoff. This is the other thing that happens a lot, is you get a root that goes across the tread, and you have a cup tread like this, and the water runs down, and the root creates a little dam, and you get a little puddle there. Well, when that's wet and you ride through it or you walk through it and somebody steps in it, you got water with mud in it. You get the impression from either a tire rolling through it or a foot coming down, and it splashes some of the mud out with the water. And it just grows and grows and grows, and it gets bigger. And then people don't want to ride through the mud puddle, so they go around. And then the trail creep starts widening out. And people do that for roots too, because some people like the roots, some people don't like the roots. So if you don't like the roots or you're uncomfortable, you swing around them and the trail starts creeping out. And so, there's lots of things that just happen over time that, can be handled. There's different ways to handle it. And, it's kind of it's an ongoing process. There's people figuring out slightly different ways to do it all the time, but the basic design principles are, they're readily available if you kind of know where to look and who to talk to. But it's like a lot of things, knowing it up here is really different than actually putting it on the ground and doing it consistently over, a 2 or 3 mile trail or whatever. It's just, so. I don't know if that made sense to you.
I've always wondered, because it seems like a lot of illusion.
Yeah, and and you get that. It's one of the big things on existing trails, and especially old trails, is that you see a lot of fall line stuff. And that's how water bars were developed. It was a way. Here's the trail. How do we keep it from erosion from happening? And in the old days, you start putting water bars across, and you'll see them made out of, there's all sorts of materials. You use rock. I've seen them made out of rubber, like plastic rubber stuff that'll stick up, and the idea being if you step on it, it's not hard, it'll just bend over, but it'll pop back up and shed the water off. And those help, but it's better if you can design them into it. And then if it's really fall line, the best thing to do is really reroute the trail. How extensive the erosion is a combination of how steep the actual trail is and what the soil content's like. So some soils, have a heavier mix of clay, and they're going to erode at a different rate than a sandier mix or a rockier mix, or So you can have one trail that's at 25% grade for 40 feet, and it doesn't erode that much, and another one may wash out. I mean, I've been on trails up in the mountains, and you know, you can tell they used to be like this, and you got a V now, and you can barely fit your tire in the bottom, and your handlebars are you got dirt above your head on both sides. And it's fantastic in the sense of it's technical. If you want to ride technical trails, it's really fun. Now the downside of it is all that soil went down the hill and went into the creek, and it's probably killing off all the trout that people want to go fish for too. So, you know, it's a complicated thing, but that's kind of the basics of it.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, Scott's last point's really really at heart of what sustainable trails about. You've got environmental concerns and you've got user concerns, and what we help do is get those two together. You've obviously got a great place to build trail and capacity to build trail, and we just like to help you, make it better and more long lasting. So you've got it for years and years.
Did you guys, when you were riding or rather looking at it, did you notice any areas that need immediate attention?
I didn't really see anything that was dangerous. There are some wooden structures out there that are either log stacks, and I didn't inspect some of the others closely, so I don't know if they're ground treated lumber or not. But as contractors, we don't build anything that's not ground treated lumber and that's going to last for many decades.
It's all ground treated.
Mm-hmm. So that would be my only concern is some of the conditions of some of the structures, but there's nothing dangerous out there, and there's in terms of major erosion, maybe some of the fall line trail, there's a few flat spots that were holding, you can tell they were holding water, but a lot of it's going to depend on how much users you're getting out there. If you've got 25, 30 people a week, that's a lot different from some of the trails in Charlotte or Wilkesboro that, get that many an hour on a busy weekend, So there's, sort of a carrying capacity at the, as far as that goes.
Part of it too is management practice. There are some trails shut down when it's wet and they close them and, open back up. That's sort of, I understand both sides of that, and personally I tend to lean towards leaving it open, and the way I always viewed it at Signal Hill was, today is a great day to be out there trying to figure out what's going on. And if somebody rides through it today, they're showing me where there's something I need to work on, is the way I viewed it. Now there's other, if you got a trail like in Charlotte that may see 50 or 60 riders come through in an afternoon, even on a rainy day, you may want to approach that differently than a smaller town trail that may have 4 or 5, so it's I think those things are kind of judgment calls that you can inform and have some input from the people there, and based on part of it's based on the soil type you have too. It depends.
Like you go down to Fish and Farm, if you try to ride that in the wet, you're gonna die. There's nothing to root.
Yeah, and roots, right. Roots can be wet and slick. If you certain types of rock can be the same way. If it's dry, they're grippy and fine, and if it's wet, they're slick. And the type of wood you build with. Most people around tend to buy treated lumber from Lowe's or Home Depot, which is a finished grade of lumber, and it's pressure treated. When that's wet, it is slick. What we've always done is what you're going to be walking or riding on, we buy rough cut, and it's a below grade pressure treated. It's better pressure treated than the other, and it's a rough cut, so it's got a texture to it, and you can ride or walk it when it's wet and it's not slick. And so those sorts of things make a difference too. I've seen a lot of people fall on really nice bridges that are made out of finished grade lumber. It's pressure treated lumber, but it's finished grade and it's wet. You come in there and lean a little bit. I've seen people bouncing off bridges all over the place, and so that
and railing and things like that, railings that you would think would be a something there for a safety issue, it
Can be a bigger issue.
Can be more of a liability than you know, as long as the height's not too great, you know, we'd recommend not using railings, because at least you can ride off of it.
Yeah. You know, if you've got a 5 or 10 foot drop, you may want railings anyway, but if it's a small drop, you may be better off not having railings for safety. But so it's there's a lot of complicated issues when you get down to brass tacks on what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and you know that you know.
Is there a law that you have to have railings for a certain height?
No, the only thing that they go through, if you have building code, right? But a bridge is not a building. Building code says if you're 30 inches or below, if the drop off a porch or a deck or a stairway or a walkway from a house is, I think it's 30 inches from the top of the walking surface, like this is the deck. If it's more than 30 inches to the ground, then you are required to have a rail. But, you know, a bridge is not a building structure, so it's not required in that sense. We've built a number of bridges with and without rails, and you know, it's something that you just have to decide. You know, I think the drop, you know, the width of the bridge is part of it, the height of the drop, maybe what you're dropping on if you fall, you know, all those things go into whether you want rails or not.
So, Tony, I've got a question. This may be my last question for you. You built North Springs Trail in an area where there was not a whole lot there. Can you talk for a minute about the economic impact that's had since you completed that trail?
Well, you know, Moore Springs is, like you said, it's out in the sticks a bit. It's near Danbury. It's adjacent to Hanging Rock State Park. It's built on property owned by a 4-H camp, and they had the Moore Springs end of the property is about 300 acres. We built on just over 100 acres. Started in early 2010 and worked through late 2014, and now it has probably 8 miles of trail. Some of it's old road included in that. You know, there's never been like an official counter out there. You know, there hasn't been like the way the highway department uses, you know, DOT count. We tried to get some rough estimates at a time. I remember in 2012, 2013, we had, you know, folks were estimating there's 50 to 60 people a week out there. Certainly on nice weekends, you'll see, it's not unusual to see 10, 15 cars in the parking lot. I guess the way that when I started the project was really as it was funded through the local council of governments as a workforce development training program. I had a bunch of young men that worked with me. When that program was over, we used Facebook to get the word out. We built about 3 miles with the workforce development guys, and then we had a loop we wanted to complete. So that's when we went to volunteers. There really weren't a lot of volunteers involved early. So the best gauge I had for how popular it was gauging the Facebook membership of people joining on. And you know, even though we're not doing any work out there, we're waiting on a bid. We did raise funds for another 6-mile extension, and State Parks is managing that now. We anticipate to be bidding on that soon. Even now, without anyone being really active to promote the trail, we still get new people liking the Facebook page all the time, which is somewhere around 1,500 people now. And so for, you know, a chunk of leftover woods out in the middle of Stokes County to have 1,500 people from all over the state and country that, you know, check in to find out what's going on. You know, there was It's not unusual for me to get, 2,000 or 3,000 people to view one post, so things get spread around the launch, depending on how exciting, newsworthy it is. I guess Strava is another, Strava's a way, it's like a computer program. You can log your ride on a phone and then upload it, and it records how many people have ridden at a trail. And so if you look at as getting ready for this, just to get an idea of the utilization, Moore Springs has segments there that have had like 500 or 600 individual riders on it. That's Strava is just a small segment of the people that ride bikes use that. So I don't really know what multiplier you'd want to apply to that. Some things like Sherman Branch in Charlotte, is that what it's called?
Yeah. Have
over 4,000. So they're super popular. Moore Springs, it attracts people. It's at 7, 8, 9 miles. It's really not something that's going to attract people from states away. We've got a good base of users from Raleigh, Durham, because Stokes County is kind of the closest mountains for people from Raleigh, Durham. Folks from Charlotte tend to go, to Pisgah. We had folks from Wilmington that drove up regularly. I've gotten to know people from Wilmington because it's close to them, and Southern Virginia. So I'd say Stokes is probably attracting people from 2 counties away. Sort of the general absorption. We always thought that when we got into double digits, you start getting to 12, 15 miles of trail, you start getting enough that the average rider is not going to be able to ride everything in one day. Like at Moore Springs, an average rider can go up there and ride it all in an afternoon. Ride it all both directions in an afternoon. So it's not really generating. And I ran a little campground there for a few years, and we had very few people come stay overnight at the campground just to ride the trails. There just wasn't enough trail. You go to trails like Salisbury, North Wilkesboro, where you do have double-digit miles of trail. You got people that plan their whole summer vacations around going to Kerr-Scott and with a bunch of buddies and camping out and staying. And you see that model around the country. This winter we traveled down to Alabama, a place near Anniston, Alabama. It's about 3 hours outside of Atlanta, and a little town down there, in partnership with the state government's putting in 75 miles of trail. So Coldwater Mountain is destined to be a major attraction for northern Alabama outdoors people, and we drove all the way from we drove 6 hours to ride there. So if you build enough trail and you build high quality trail, which is what they have in Alabama, people are going to find out about it, and folks are going to come there. And in that regard, it is like Field of Dreams. If you build it for them, they will come. If you build trail to attract people, you can attract people. You can also build trail for just you and your buddies, and those will be the only ones that ride there. But if you want a lot of people, and you want to invest in those sorts of recreational facilities, people will come to them. Mountain biking's like skiing in the Rocky Mountains. It's like golf. You can ride a mountain bike on a street or a sidewalk, but it's not the same as going out in the woods and riding in the woods. It's just like you can play golf in your backyard, but that's not like going to a golf course and playing golf. And that's what people want. These folks, mountain bikers, they don't want to camp by the side of the road. They've got $5,000 bikes and $40,000 cars, and they want to stay in nice hotels and eat pizza and drink beer and have a good time. And they want new places to ride. And so if you build, look at DuPont. I think that's an excellent model. Wilkesboro, DuPont both. There's really nothing going on in those communities. And now, well, with DuPont, you have, those guys from Colorado relocated their brewery there. in part because of the mountain biking. Made a major industrial investment in the community. Partly it's because they got good clean water, but the other part is because it fits in with a brand they're trying to communicate, with a culture they're trying to appeal to. So they're definitely viable economic development tools.
I live in Statesville, and there's a little trail there. You got Wilkesboro, you got Lake Norman, you got trails in Charlotte, and people there, the local trail that you have in town, the people that are going to take care of it are local people. That's just the way it is. And you've got to develop and motivate locals to take care of it. And the better designed and the better built the trail is, the less work it will be, which is a good thing for volunteers. Because it's tough. It gets old going out there and fixing something over and over and over. And I learned at Signal Hill I asked people, I talked to people, and I learned through trial and error what works and what doesn't. And, figuring those things out, part of it was because of our experience, part of it's because of our motivation, and, we liked it, we've put a lot of time into it, and we figured out a lot of those things. And so that becomes easier if it's well designed and well built. And that means you can have fewer people take care of the same amount of trail, or the other thing is you can get more trail on the ground, maybe in another park that's near it, or expand onto other land that's available there in the same park, and fewer people can take care of that trail with less work, and you can have more fun to do what we all really want to do, which in the end is ride a bike and have fun. And the other thing that happens with these is you get trail runners and trail walkers and people that walk their dogs out there, even though they're not bike riders, and and all that stuff works for them too. The design principles of the trail, it doesn't matter what the user is. The only differences really are horses and motor-powered vehicles. Other than that, there are things that you will do for a mountain bike if it's a mountain bike primary use trail. Like now, one of the big things now is berms. You got sloped turns so you can keep your speed up going around things. And that's not really something you need to do for walkers, although I've seen runners run on. You get people that run trails and they'll run on berms too, depending on how they're designed. Then they're not going to go way up them. But the basic principles are the same, and you will get more people out there than just bikers on it too. You get a lot of people that want to run, trail run instead of running on the roads. It's just more fun to be in the woods, and there's nothing wrong with sidewalks and all that stuff, but it's nice if you live in the city to be able to get out in the woods not far from home and just get away from the city stuff a little bit. So,
I got a question. If y'all go with the bridge over the creek and use that new area, how much is that going to add to the trail and length?
Well, we'd have to design something. I don't know. We hadn't really even looked at how much land that is. There's all sorts of different basic guidelines on how much trail you can get on how many acres. Mm-hmm. Some of the state guidelines are, like a mile for 25 acres, I've heard, which is really sparse. And you can put it as tight as you want. We would have to just go over there and design something. I don't remember how big that area was. A couple acres, I don't know.
It's probably 7 or 8 acres. Yeah. Right, much of it, 10, maybe more than you think, but right much is lowland.
Down in that creek area, floodplain.
I think there might be 5 acres that you could really.
I think it's around 5.
About what
25 is set back there, but 5 of it's buildable.
So, you know, depending on how particular everybody was about, you know, how close the trail is, you know, sight lines and some of that stuff. You know, what do you think, Tony? Half mile to mile and a half, something like that? Mile and a half.
It's hard to say without walking the land and knowing. I mean, you can.
Yeah, and getting a feel from you guys about what, you know, how much you care, how much you guys want to have more of a alone experience where you know, because like one of the things sometimes on design is they go, I don't want to be able to see another section of trail that's not right before or after where I am. And you know, depending on the terrain, that can be easy or hard. And it can be,
Year or two.
yeah, so, you know, and, you know, undergrowth, how much undergrowth there is goes into that, so there's all sorts of things. But, you know, that's rough estimate, might be a mile loop, give or take. You know, one thing that is a current little design thing in mountain bike trail design now is they call them stacked loops. So you'll, there's a place out in western North Carolina called Jackrabbit Trails that's, so basically you have if you think about somebody's head, so you got a loop that's like this, and that center loop that's the head is the simplest loop. And that's where you go from the parking lot into that, and you go here. And then it's kind of like Mickey Mouse's ears, right? You have different loops off of that. And you can make those other loops you can sign them separately. So you can make one really hard and one a little bit harder, and one's got a lot of berms on it, and the other's got off-camber turns, old school, you know, you can have all sorts of things on those different loops. And, you know, that might be, you know, that's the way I would be thinking about that one little loop, is it's an ear over here, and, you know, we could do it, and it's just an option off the rest of the trail. And, you know, we haven't spent a lot of time looking at the site, but that's a possibility, you know, I think on almost any park, because most parks in cities end up being sort of weird pieces of land. They're not like just a big chunk like the size of the room that's square. You have a little thing over here and something sticking out over here, and so sometimes that stack loop system or multi-loop system may be a good way to go design-wise in making something that's fun and giving you a lot of diversity. And you want to, the tendency is like with that, you want to make the easiest trail closest to the parking lot where you're starting, and the harder stuff is going to be out there to where the people that aren't comfortable on their bikes and are learning are going to be on the easiest trail when they start, and they're going to be tired and they're going to be ready to come back, and they're not going to push themselves onto that harder stuff where, you know, where there's a little more chance of something happening or them getting uncomfortable with things or whatever. So that'd be your best guess without actually going out and laying something out. So.
I have time for one more question. Anybody has anything?
I got one quick one. Just curious, for this terrain and around here, how long does it take? How fast does it do a trail? How fast do you get one, like a mile?
If we did the whole thing, in other words, if we did turnkey on it, where we did all the hand finish and everything, a mile, and it would depend on weather, you know, a fair amount, and it would also probably depend on if we're berms, if you're doing bank turns and stuff, does take longer because you're moving a lot of dirt, and it's a little more difficult process. But you know, 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. You know, if things are.
When we did I teamed up with Jim Hort to do a project in Lenore last year. We did right at 4 miles in 4 months, but we were just doing the rough cut. So if you've got,
Volunteers.
the local bike club was coming in doing the hand finishing. So that speeds things up, you know, if you've got that sort of partnership going. Like Scott said, if we're doing turnkey, we'll probably use the excavator more. That's a little slower, but you know, you're not relying on volunteers at all. And again, depending on weather, and you know, it doesn't look like there's a lot of rock out there. You know, that's a big thing that slows you down. So you know, you're probably looking at somewhere around, you know, 6 to 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks a mile, something like that.
If everything went perfectly, you might do a mile in a month. And realistically, it's, you know, a few setbacks, which usually happen, you know, it might be closer to 2. So, you know, 6 weeks is probably the average.
But again, the thing, I guess the last thing I'd say is that, you know, you're even in the jobs that we interface with volunteers, or we use volunteers, the workload on the volunteers is a lot different. You know, you're not trying to create that tread. You're just there really essentially cleaning up behind the machine, taking the debris like the roots and the organic material and spreading that out, doing some of the back cut that's difficult for the machine to do, final raking of the tread. It frees up more time to be creative, you know, so even though it's still you know, labor, it's still, you know, it's still work involved. It's a very different animal from 100% hand-built trail.
Yeah, the heavy lifting, so to speak, is being done by the machine, and the light lifting is done by the volunteers. So, yeah.
All right, guys, well, I want to thank you guys.
I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Is there going to be another meeting tonight? After this meeting, we're going to get together on another day.
It will be, the next meeting will be May 20th.
Is that a mountain bike trail meeting or?
SBC meeting, we'll include, like this will go, what we talk about now, we'll possibly.
I think it needs to be a mountain bike trail meeting.
We can definitely talk about that.
Focused group. We've got a lot of questions and things, but this is not the time.
Right.
To do all of it. I'm thinking like 8 people or something, you know.
Right.
Or less. We are now using every inch that Steve will let us use over there. 6.5 miles, and Mike's always said, why don't we do this? I said, see that yellow sign? Fine, whatever. We're using all that Steve will let us use, and like when it was started years ago, said you can't go here, you can't go over there, and I understand all of that. They're going to build another field or whatever, but we're now using everything we do. Go across the creek. Linda and I always talks about it. I said, Linda, you know what happened to Hitler? He overextended himself twice. He went out further than he could maintain. Okay, he had too many fronts going on. He went too far, and he didn't have a supply. I think going across the creek, you got to be careful about putting something over there, and nobody would maintain it, I guess is what I'm saying. I do want to say that I've seen work that these guys have done, several trails. I've helped buddies to build on some trails and do excellent work. I'm a destination person. I'm getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and going to Georgia. Southern campers are going there. We're going to be biking down there. Fast, folks. And that's a destination.
Absolutely.
You've done good work up there.
LJ.
Yeah, at Wilkesboro. I mean, I think I've rode 80 or 90 some trails. Not to keep up with all of it. Everywhere. That's just, there's a lot more trails than we think. But these guys do good work. I believe what they tell me. I worked with the guy that works with him, Bob. And Mike. In fact, Mike drew out a ticket and won a free bike over there about a year or two ago.
Yeah, so I think we'll need you to get together. We'll meet.
But I think we need a focused group. I've got, for example, what are the requirements to get a grant? you just don't say, we need a grant. How much does Salisbury have to pay? You know, as far as, this, the government required bids, all kind of that upfront stuff.
Yeah, and
At
that's
least
all
we don't have to
dependent
worry about the
upon,
land, I think, 'cause
that's all dependent upon the specifics of whatever grant you're trying to go for.
So that's all the upfront focus group is the way I see all that. Until you get that going, you know, but yeah, there are, and Mike and I have talked about, there are some things could be done to help out over there, yeah, right.
So hopefully,
And they do good work. so-
hopefully some discussion comes out of this meeting, and we'll get together, and I'll talk to you, and we'll maybe possibly put together some meetings or focus groups or something like that.
Yeah, if it's not a focus group, I ain't gonna come. Because we need to sit down and nitty-gritty this.
Right.
6 or 7, 8 people, you know, that's what we need.
And we'll be able to help.
Do
with-
you agree? Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely,
Because
absolutely
we-
agree. And, you know, of the granting choices that we know of, we know the submission deadlines, you know, and so we can help set those down, get a calendar together and say, here's where you gotta be at a certain time to make that happen. And, you know, and those tend to be federal and state. The other thing that we're not gonna know anything about, which we've seen work in other communities, are regional or local and regional area foundations. So for instance, in Rockingham County, it's the Reidsville Area Foundation. They commissioned an overall trail master plan for the county, and then the Reidsville Area Foundation puts in a little bit of seed money in each one of the little trail projects all around the county. The town matches a little bit. They've got other organizations that go out and look for other funding. Now that they've got a group of people working together and they've got small trails going, that gives the bigger funders more confidence to come in and put their money in